Been waiting for a long time for this interview with my next guest, Christopher Shade, because we have been doing some testing and experimenting on me to give you some real life experiences. And Chris Shade has a PhD in environmental science. He is the founder and CEO of Quicksilver Scientific, which specializes in biological, environmental, and analytical chemistry of mercury in all of its forms. And he has patented a mercury speciation diagnostic process to analyze human toxicity and founded the only clinical lab in the world that gives a mercury speciation analysis. And I think this means that they can determine where mercury toxicity may be coming from, but he's going to clarify that for us. And Dr. Shade goes way beyond what most humans do and has designed cutting edge systems of nutraceuticals for detoxification and antioxidant protection, including advanced phospholipid delivery systems for both water and fat soluble compounds. If this just went over your head, don't worry. He's going to explain all of it. He's a scientist, folks, and created a technology that increases the bioavailability of supplements and protocols, which make them more effective, like way more effective. And so we're really lucky to have Dr. Shade on today because he's really in so much demand all over the world to talk about mercury, environmental toxicities, neuroinflammation, immune dysregulation, and the human detoxification system. And he's helped corporate executives, professional athletes, celebrities, children with autism, patients with chronic immune disorders, and now women in menopause like you and me. And if you've heard him speak on the podcasting circuit before, you can see that he is super passionate about changing the way the medical industry delivers care and helping us really to understand health and our own bodies. So you can guess that we're going to talk about heavy metal toxicity and what we can do about it. And we're also going to try to cover, if we have enough time, about what he knows about menopause, hormones, and women's health. And I think you're all going to be very, very surprised. So before we jump in this, I have to read the fancy little disclaimer saying that the statements we make in this podcast have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, and the products we may talk about are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So now, without further ado, let's meet Dr. Shade. Welcome.
Zora, thank you for having me here. I'm always excited. I like speaking to all the different groups, but you'll see, and it'll be a little surprising that women's health has been absolutely our focus for the last couple of years. We have a whole hormone line and threading the metals and menopause together. I think I said to you right before we started that in the first 2 years of doing this, I'm like, why are all these women coming through my door 50 years old? And at the time, I was in my 30s, and as I got to understand all the mechanisms that are involved with detoxification, in fact, right up until now, these mechanisms with detoxification are intimately interwoven with longevity mechanisms, and in fact, a lot of those mechanisms are going downhill as you get into menopause. So all of a sudden, like this toxic burden that you are hanging on to but getting away with starts overwhelming you. And that's when you really have to get on top of all of these different chemistries inside of you and know what you're exposing yourself to and start distributing, what you expose yourself to, how you bring detox up, and how you integrate that with hormones so you can have another hot 50 years.
Wow. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense what you just said. And it just, with the loss of our hormones, it just seems like everything just gets so much harder. But we can replenish them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, I just want to share with people when I read your bio, but I literally just skimmed through it. And it's only a fraction of what you've done. You've done so much in your lifetime, and you're just such an expert in this field. You've written a ton of specific scientific papers, and you're really deep into the science of mercury and detoxification more than anyone here can imagine. So I don't think there's really anyone better that I can speak to about the topic of heavy metal toxicity. So I'm really grateful you're here. And before we dive in, when I read your bio, I was like, I think we needed to discuss really what Mercury speciation means, and if I understood it correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had this long, sort of storied life doing a lot of different things. I was in school as a scientist and I like left undergrad. I was like, this is bullshit. Environmental science is just running around behind DuPont and pretending they're not really doing much. And I went off, so I was an organic farmer for a while, and that was a long time before there was USDA organic. It was really getting in and creating soil ecosystems. So there was a systems biology thing going on in there really deeply. And then when I came back into doing environmental science again, it was, looking at all these interconnected parts. And I got my PhD looking in environmental chemistry of metals and specifically mercury, and developed this testing called mercury speciation. And mercury speciation is during the test looking at the forms of mercury that are in there, because we tend to think, oh, mercury, it's just mercury, like salt, it's sodium chloride. Well, sodium can be in a lot of different forms, not as many as mercury can, but mercury, we have one form that, we grew up, you and I grew up in an age where people were putting dental amalgams, fillings into cavities of your teeth that were this gray color that were called silver fillings. Now, they were 50% mercury and about 48% silver and 2% of a couple other different metals. And so we were stuffing our mouths with all this mercury. And then and that's called inorganic mercury when we do a measurement of it. And then there's another form called methyl mercury, which is an organomercuric. It's got a methyl group stuck to it. And that's formed in the environment from the inorganic mercury. And that has the property that it builds up in the food chain. It bioaccumulates so that the fish in the water can have a million or more fold more mercury concentration than the water they're swimming in. And this form of mercury is made in bacteria, goes into phytoplankton, then zooplankton, then the larger insects, then the minnows, and then the bigger fish eat those. And it keeps going in because it looks to the body like methionine, the essential amino acid. So
Hmm.
it gets drawn into the protein structures of this fish. And as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they're not getting rid of it, they're bioaccumulating it. In fact, that's why we absorb it so well. We absorb it with about 95% efficiency because we think, and we absorb it across amino acid transporters, and it goes into our brain across amino acid transporters. If we're pregnant, it goes into the fetus, and there's a higher concentration in the fetus than it is in the mother. Because what are you doing? You're growing a baby, a lot of protein needs, so you're pushing protein in there, and you're pushing mercury in there with it in this mistaken, you're mistaking this methyl mercury stuck to another amino acid called methionine. That's how it moves. I'm sorry, it's called cysteine. It moves around your body like that, and you think it's methionine. So it's important when we're looking at you to know how much is this inorganic form, how much is this organic form. And we'll look at that in the blood, and then we'll look at the urine and hair as excretion indices of that. Inorganic mercury is coming out the urine, methyl mercury is coming out the hair. They should be in this certain ratio, and if they're not, that means that the detox processes are weakening. And what you'll see is the excretion goes down and the blood levels go up. You retain it, and the more damage you get into kidney and liver and the cellular biology, the more you retain and build this stuff up in your blood.
Hmm.
So speciation is looking at the different forms and
Are,
then we couple looking at it in different parts to correlate your load versus your detox.
are there any forms that are good that we should be having certain levels of mercury at?
Not really. No, there's
Okay.
not, there's some metals where they find some enzymes that work with cadmium, but not in humans, in some microbial form they use it. And then there's a lot of metals where too little and too much is like copper deficiency and copper excess are both problems. But as of yet, we haven't found a reason to have forms of mercury. You know, you go back to the great masters in the Renaissance, and most of those guys were mercury poisoned. Mozart totally was.
Really?
Many of the scientists were, and Dietrich Klinghardt used to say there's an insane genius that comes with Mercury, but there's all this paranoia and all these strange things that come along with it. So I'm not advocating for you know building up your Mercury levels to express your inner creative madman.
There's the mad scientist. Maybe he's
The
mad
Mad
because of
Hatters
Mercury.
so the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland was a mercury poisoned individual. Hatters, they used to use mercury nitrate to soften the felts, and these guys would be licking it and turning it and licking it and turning it and working out the felt. And like up in Danbury, Connecticut, there was a huge hatting industry, and those guys all went nuts, like certifiably, and that's where the character of the Mad Hatter comes from.
Super interesting. You're like a historian too. A scientist.
Yeah. My dad is a historian. Maybe I hold some of that.
Interesting. So I'm really glad we're covering this topic of heavy metal toxicity because I haven't talked about it in yet on my podcast, and it's not something that's covered very often in that menopause space. I mean, we talk about detoxes like detoxing from a bad diet, but or maybe we talk about detoxification of estrogen, but tell us, why should a woman in perimenopause and postmenopause be concerned about heavy metals?
Yeah, let me count the ways. Let's go into like the top two symptoms that come off of heavy metals. Number one is fatigue, because it gets into the mitochondria and damages the balance of antioxidants and pro-oxidants in the mitochondria, specifically sucking up the antioxidants and binding to them and breaking down their enzymatic structure, so that you start getting oxidative stress in the mitochondria, which break down the mitochondria. They pull down NAD, which is the driving source of creating ATP, or cellular energy, and it's also the driving source that manages which genes turn on and turn off, your epigenetics. And when NAD is high, it's keeping you in this longevity state where you generate a lot of energy and you create a cardiometabolic efficiency, meaning you burn calories well, you don't store fat, you don't. So we actually store inflammation. Storing fat and becoming inflamed go together. It's part of this old survival, talk about history. It's a survival mechanism from the ice ages. We don't want to be in that. We want to be over in this clean burning longevity space. So metals are immediately pulling you away from that at this mitochondrial NAD level. If that weren't enough, they go to the brain and they make you a little wackadoodle. And what do they do specifically? They hyperactivate the glutamate receptors. So 80% of neurotransmission in your brain, and all neurotransmission is a yin yang thing. You have excitatory and inhibitory. Now, inhibitory is good, it's calming. Excitatory is good, it puts you on, it makes you know. But glutamate specifically, when it gets up and overactive, drives anxiety and irritability. Now, I don't know about you as a perimenopausal woman, but anxiety and irritability is like cause number one. It is the biggest thing going on in your brain. And that is because of this, some of these movements that are happening. So if that's the yang, what's the yin in the brain? The yin is GABA. GABA is the Zen neurotransmitter, and glutamate's supposed to be there to know what to do, and it get you vigilant, but also put you fight or flight. And GABA says, all right, threat's done, let's chill back out. So with time, naturally, as you go through menopause, you've got an excess of estrogen over progesterone. Progesterone starts going down through the 40s, and estrogen staying there. Then it starts swinging like mad, going real high, real low, real high, real low. And so you've got estrogen excess. Just in general, most women will have that. And the estrogen is a glutamate agonist, and it turns up that irritability and anxiousness. But the metals are doing that too. So you don't need two things going in and yanking that, turning up that space. And they do it pretty heavily. And there's sort of a negative feedback loop. Once you get that spin going, That's shifting your autonomic nervous system is like a background nervous system. So my central nervous system says, there's my cup, grab it, pull it up, bring it to the mouth. All right. The autonomic nervous system is going, okay, I'm going to put blood over into this organ, not into that organ. I'm going to get the muscles ready to do things, or no, we're cool. I'm going to digest. So the autonomic nervous system has these two sides. We always talk about fight or flight. That's the sympathetic autonomic nervous system. And then parasympathetic is this calming one. And that's, fight or flight's over there. This is rest, digest, repair, regenerate, detoxify. The autonomic nervous system has to be in a calm state to say, all right, let's regenerate everything. So as we age, the body's naturally moving over to trip into the sympathetic too often. And when we trip into sympathetic, we downregulate repair, regeneration, and detoxification. And so we start accumulating more of these toxins that are jacking us up more when we're already in this, propensity to get jacked up. And so they can lock the whole thing in and create this spin that's not just a brain spin, it's a biochemical spin. And so as we get into that age, and then, there's this major trigger for detox called NRF2, and we might get into talk about it. It's a cellular level. It's a mechanism that's in there that when toxins build up or when oxidative stress builds up, it flips this switch, something goes into the nucleus and turns up all your internal cellular antioxidants and detoxification machinery. So it says, things are dirty here, clean up. It's like a cleanup switch. And it needs a cofactor called the PXR, the pregnenolone X receptor, which uses either pregnenolone or progesterone. So those have been tanking through the 40s, so you have less support to get the cleanup crew out in the cells and clean up. So these things are all working against you. The toxins are building up, the estrogen's building up, it's shifting you into that activated state, and you don't have enough support from the other hormones that are the calm, chill, cleanup hormones. So basically, you don't want metals in there monkeying the whole thing. And then the last thing that they do, if they get high enough, they cause telomere attrition. You probably, if you talk about longevity, telomeres are the end caps of the chromosomes, and they have this funny holographic input on the whole of the chromosome, and even damaging the outside, something even in the middle gets turned down. And so as we age, the telomeres get shorter and shorter, but if the toxins can come in and really rapidly shorten them, and then that tends to flip the cell into something called senescence, the zombie cell, the cell that's not doing anything anymore, but secreting more inflammatory. It's spreading, propagating fields of inflammation, and it's just dead. So under our wrinkles, the fibroblasts that are supposed to make collagen and elastin and make us nice and young, those have gone senescent. And so it's hitting us all these different ways. It's turning down the energy. It's shifting what genes are on and off towards an older phenotype. It's jacking with our brain. It's shortening our telomeres, and it's aging us.
Wow, that was chock-a-block of information. Can I ask a favor?
Canada.
Is it possible to turn off the notifications that keep bleeping if it's not too much? No?
Nope.
They're gonna keep going.
I mean, I can go into my computer for
Oh.
the next 30 minutes trying to figure it
Okay,
out.
forget it. I should have told you before.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. So then I'm definitely, as we're losing our hormones, is certainly not helping our detoxification system. And that's the way I've interpreted everything you've said, is that there is the heavy metals and the loss of estrogen can wreak all this havoc in our brains and make us into this more sympathetic, fight or flight system. And it's just like a vicious circle. I see that they're all working together. So it's not just like, here's one, shut that down and everything's going to be fine. It seems to be there's got to be this sort of symphony that is happening in a positive or a negative way. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it really, there's this sort of razor's edge, we can go this way, we can go that way.
Mhm.
Certs or sips, I call it. Sirtuins are this anti-inflammatory, very metabolically clean, longevity way. Sips, uh, I call it shitty inflammatory processes, but it's stress-induced premature senescence, uh, is, this inflammatory way that's aging us very rapidly. In fact, there's terms for toxins now called gerontogens, these ones that shift you into rapid aging. In fact, we did a 3-month study where we detoxed people and gave them some mitochondrial supplements. We're able to reverse their biological age, take an average of 1 year off their biological age in 3 months, strongly turn down the rate at which they're aging, all through these detox processes. And it's probably a combination of the toxins are gerontogens, and the triggers you have to hit to get rid of them are ones that are pro-longevity triggers.
Oh my God, there's so much going on. Honestly, it's like the loss of our hormones, then the possible heavy metal toxicity buildup, and then just aging as it is.
Yeah,
So it's like we gotta, people sometimes say, oh, well, as we age, we gotta slow down. I'm like, no, we gotta speed up because it's so much harder now to like clean up the mess. So we
yeah,
gotta be switched on. And so let's give people a little perspective here. Let's talk about my Quicksilver heavy metal test results because
yeah,
I eat a ton of seafood and fish, and I post about this all the time. So proud of how like my diet. And for a long time, I've had my head in the sand, and I didn't want to really look at my mercury levels because I was afraid what I was going to find. But you came along, and I finally did it. So you took my hair, you took my
yeah,
blood and urine samples, and you came up with the data. And I've taken other heavy metal tests, and they don't do quite what you do, and they didn't
yeah.
reveal what you revealed. So, what should we tell our audience about these results?
Yeah, so when we look at them, we break out these forms of mercury. How much is methyl mercury that's coming from the fish? How much is inorganic mercury? And this inorganic salt form of mercury is actually more toxic at a cellular level. There's a perception that methyl mercury is more toxic, but that's just like if you're eating capsules of one versus the other, you'll die from the methyl mercury first because you absorb it more. But once it's in your blood at a cellular level, the inorganic is more toxic. Now, inorganic, I said before, is coming mostly from dental amalgam, but uh, it also comes from the breakdown of this methyl mercury. Now, for you, you don't have any dental amalgams. You eat a lot of fish, and you've done that for a long period. And so what happens is some people break a lot of the methyl mercury down into inorganic. Now, the inorganic form has to get out through the kidneys. The methyl mercury form is getting out through the liver and stool. And so if the kidneys start having a hard time passing that out, it starts building up in the blood. So you've got a high methyl mercury load up at 10 parts per billion. The 95th percentile for reference is 7.4. And so,
Wow.
you're up above the 95th percentile. So it's pretty high. And, I've seen people who deal with this a lot. I get a lot of samples from Japan, and they're all high because they do this all the time. But you detox them, and everything works better. So the methyl mercury is high, but the inorganic mercury is really high too. And when those both are high, I don't like that. And that is, 0.5, and it's right above the 95th percentile, which is 0.46. So those are both high. And then we compare inorganic mercury in the urine to inorganic mercury in the blood. So when the blood gets high, but the urine's low, that means the kidneys aren't keeping up with the load. They're building up in the blood. That's what we're seeing here. Same with the hair to blood ratio. It's not that hair is your biggest excretion route. Bile would be, but we can't do bile samples, and stool testing is a mix of things. It's not very consistent. And so in the hair to blood ratio, we see that's off a little bit too. And so a good detox, we're going to feed in all the elements for your detoxification system. This is glutathione and different phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals that stimulate the whole system that works with glutathione to grab the mercury, make these conjugates, and then you pee and poop it all out. You're going to stimulate the system of throwing from the cell into the blood pulling out of the blood in the liver, dumping it into the bile, and just get that whole movement out really going and make sure everything is going out, not being reabsorbed. Reabsorbed is a lot of stuff goes out of your liver into your GI, but you reabsorb it. So we create this whole system to make everything go down and out and drain those levels down. And as you were saying, you feel like you've done well with that over time. And then I was saying, yeah, but now is where it really makes itself known. As your hormone levels decrease, your ability to keep the cells on top of it, because if the cells are always kicking the toxins out, and yeah, if there's a high level in the blood, but the cells are dealing with it, you're okay. But over time, the cell's ability to do that goes down, and you feel the punch of the toxins build up.
So would you notice a woman then who is on a hormone therapy, she has the estrogen, the progesterone, and maybe perhaps the balance and activating the detoxification system with those hormones because she's replenishing them, would she do better in terms of
Yeah,
detoxing?
yeah. I mean, there's so many levels. I mean, you take, someone who's in peri or full menopause and hasn't done any hormone replacement, and they're feeling bad on so many different levels. Their energy's in the gutter, their anxiety's racing, their focus sucks, and you put them on the hormones, and there's just like, oh my God, I feel better at a million different levels. And one of those is detoxification, being able to do that. That's why I like to do it all at once. Like, let's get you on the hormones, let's detox. A lot of people are like, let me detox first. It's like, yeah, but you kind of need the help of the hormones to be able to detox. And you can do it different ways. It's progesterone and pregnenolone are the biggest ones, especially progesterone. That is the biggest one for righting the ship. And you can, all right, we're just going to give you progesterone and detox you, but I would put you on all this stuff. And we sort of have a theory of, which ones we bring in peri, menopause, post-menopause. There's this sort of bringing in more and more estrogens. And so I like to do the whole thing. Take the trash out at the same time you put the hormones in.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about, because I mentioned to you before I took your test, I had a heavy metal test with just hair. That's all they did. And of course I didn't get quite the service that I get with you, because you come with there was a doctor who explained the results to me and everything. It was so impressive. But let's say there's a lot of heavy metal test kits out there. And when I started to ask questions, because the heavy metal, the mercury levels in this other test was like, yeah, it's high, but like not that big of a deal. And what was high was more radiation, and I was depleted in every single vitamin, despite all of the vitamins and the minerals that I've been taking. It was as if I were going to die tomorrow. And then I found out that very
That's
often
the hair tissue mineral
just the
analysis.
hair, just the hair.
Yeah, just the
And
hair.
it was just, I did some research and it just found out that's, these kits are just not very accurate. And you could send, the samples to, same person 3 times to the same place, and you're going to get 3 different answers. What's going on? Are these really inaccurate? And why is Quicksilver heavy metal kits different than the others?
Well, there's a couple of different hair kits out there. Some will take your hair and do some sort of, energy testing on it, and then, oh, this is what we see. And that's just like, oh, come on, that could be anything. Then there's the ones who take your hair, digest it in acid, and run it through, it's called ICP-MS. It's for measuring metals. All right, even if they get those accurately, what do they mean? And the thing with hair is there's very few metals that go into hair that are direct correlates of what's in the blood. Mercury is, and it's just been studied up and down. A lot of these other ones are like, well, we're going to look at your sodium to potassium ratio in your hair and tell you, what your metabolism is. And it's just like, there's just not a lot of research there to support all of these suppositions that they make. They got these numbers and they have all this data about you, and like you said, oh, I'm about to die and I'm deficient in all these things and radiation toxicity, and it's like, yeah, I just don't know that has really been really worked out. So there's a couple things. Is it an accurate analysis? And analytical accuracy is, I mean, doing that is it's not that it's easy to do, but it's easy to know if you're accurate or not, because you'll get blood samples or hair samples from different labs where they've established exactly what those levels are, and you make sure you're getting the same levels. And so it's there's a very defined science to keeping a very accurate analytical system going. So even if they are accurate for hair, what does it all mean? And then there was these things, challenge tests, where they give you a bunch of chelators and you'd pee out the metals, and the metals always go way out when you take the chelators, because that's what they do. They take metals from in the blood and lymph and you pee them out. And so that was there for a while. Everybody like, oh my God, look how high my metals went. Like, everybody's goes up. The question is, relatively, how high are they? And so chelation challenge was needed a long, long time ago, when we didn't have really accurate analysis, or at low levels in blood and urine, as it was. You had to elevate things. So now we have all the tools. We don't need all those. And then the unique thing that the Mercury speciation brings in is, how much is which form? Like, you're a great example. I can dissect everything in you and say, all right, fish is the main one. I know you don't have amalgam, so I know you're making a lot of inorganic out of there. I see your urine to blood's off. You're not peeing out enough. Hair to blood's off. That means we need to build up glutathione system. Boom, we know what to do with you. And that might be missed in a lot of tests. And then we also did the total blood metals, and that's looking at nutrient and toxin elements, and you got to look at both. And so often, like with heavy metals, if you're high in heavy metals and really low in zinc, one of the things that heavy metals do is go into the zinc enzymes. A zinc enzyme would be an enzyme like this organic thing, and holds the zinc right in the middle. And the zinc helps it move electrons around and do its job, whatever chemical transformation it's going to do. And enzymes are really important because they make things happen in your cellular chemistry that wouldn't happen just with the molecules floating around. Grabs one, grabs another, makes them do something. And the zinc has to be in there. Sometimes it's a copper, sometimes it's an iron, and the heavy metal will get in there and kick the zinc off. Like in some of these, mercury has a 10 billion fold higher affinity for that site than the zinc is. So we got to make sure there's a lot of zinc around and not a lot of mercury. So we got to look at your zinc levels. Now, you had enough zinc, but you're low in copper, low in magnesium. Those are important for detoxification. Not like gonna die low, but hey, let's juice some of that in there. Molybdenum, I'd put a little bit more of that in there, because we're going to throw molybdenum, helps you turn over sulfur. And if molybdenum's low, you might be reactive to onions or garlic or peppers, and high sulfur foods, make you gassy or brain foggy. And we're going to be putting a lot of sulfur in during the detox, so we might juice that one up a little. Then we look at the other toxins: antimony, arsenic, cadmium, lead. You're not bad in any of those. Cadmium wouldn't hurt to come down a little. And mercury's the main thing because of your seafood consumption. If we're making a plan for you, we can make it based on all what's in here. All right, let's throw these minerals in. Let's focus on the mercury, and then these others are on the borderline. Do we want to put other metal toxin detoxification elements in there? We just talk and discuss.
And then wouldn't those other metals wouldn't come down with just the focusing on the metal, the
Arsenic,
mercury
yeah.
detox?
So with the mercury detox, we're going to be driving the glutathione system. We'll get mercury down, arsenic will come down, cadmium will come down a little bit, and then lead won't really change. So you don't have a high lead, and so cadmium maybe we want to bring down. So it's kind of a discussion. Do we want to bring the EDTA in? Do we not want to? I like EDTA because it does a lot of other things
What's
around
EDTA?
chronic. EDTA is a metal chelator that's specific for lead, and people do EDTA IVs. We have a liposome of EDTA, and I like it for some of the things that it helps with if you're addressing chronic infections. It's a biofilm breaker, it's an anticoagulant. nitric oxide upregulator. So it helps, it's a circulation, really helps things move and helps clear crud out of the system when you're, when you're addressing that. And so that's an addition that doesn't necessarily have to be in there, but I kind of like it. So yeah, you're on the borderline for doing the EDTA, but definitely all these glutathione system upregulation. So we give you liposomal glutathione. We give you stuff in our formula called liver sauce, which are NRF2 upregulators. That was that trigger inside the cell that turns up all your cellular antioxidant and detox machinery. That gets the cells to spit the metals out into circulation. So we're going to feed glutathione. We're going to feed NRF2 upregulation. We have things for the liver. I mean, traditional bitters. In fact, menopausal women, you should all have bitters around. Our bitters, cocktail bitters, Swedish bitters. It is so important because it keeps the liver flowing, pulling stuff from the blood and dumping it out with the bile into the GI. So bile is coming out of the liver, and we know bile. We're like, wait, doesn't that have something to do with fat metabolism? It goes down it's like a detergent, emulsifies the fat so we can digest and absorb it. And so if you don't have a lot of bile flow, you can't handle fat well. But bile actually brings all the toxins out. So if you don't have bile flow, you don't have toxin flow. So you've got indigestion and you're holding on to toxins. And what blocks all that? Excess estrogen and anxiety and irritability and fight or flight. And so we're always, and this is why women have way more gallbladder removals, way more gallbladder issues than men. So women always need to be feeding that. And that's what the bitter tastes do for us. They open up and keep that bile flow going and help us stay harmonized. So in our detox, we got glutathione system, we got cell detox system, we got bile flow system, and then we got binders. Once we activate all that and move stuff down to the GI, we got these binders, things, like charcoal is a classic binder. Charcoal's not going into your blood. Charcoal's going into your GI and grabbing toxins there, and then you poop them out. And so there's different binders for different toxins. We blend a lot of them together. There's one we have called IMD that's specific for mercury. And so we're going to give you a combination of binders so that when all those metals and other toxins get down there, we grab it and hold on to it.
Wow. Okay. So with somebody, I'm sure this is not unusual. You see probably plenty of people like me who have high mercury levels and maybe other things, but it sounds like you have really specific uh, protocols, because when I got the results, and I was really impressed with the doctor who explained everything to me. He deciphered exactly, explained just like you where this is coming from. And he mentioned the Cube 2.0 or something, and you just
Yeah.
rattled off a bunch of stuff that you have on your website. Your website's got tons of products.
Yeah.
So how does somebody figure this out? They take your test, they get this consultation. Will they get an exact list of, okay, this is what you need to buy and how long you need to take it and how to take it, etc.?
Yeah. Now, if you're kind of new into this, you want to get a practitioner that's going to lead you through all this, and if you do our testing as a direct access, at certain states you can come right and do it. And, we'll give you a small consultation about it. Probably won't be as, because you were doing this podcast, you probably went further into it than, that's kind of expensive. If we were giving away like this guy's time all the time and, oh yeah, give him a call back and stuff, we would be losing tons of money because, he costs a lot. And so it's good to have somebody to help lead you through this. And that Cube 2.0, that's one of our pro ones you buy through doctors, or they'll give you a code to buy it online. And that is really where I'd go for you. It's sort of like the Cadillac. It's got everything in there and includes the EDTA. You'll be sure to be very clean at the end of that. But then we have generalist ones that anybody can get. Our push catch liver detox, our pre-tox, which is a gentle one, or advanced push catch. And those are generalist. You're going to get a broad range of toxins out. You're going to help your metabolism, but you're not going as deep into the trickier ones like the metals, where you want, somebody kind of with you on the journey. So there's a lot that, a 1 month advanced push catch does great for everybody. And a lot of people do, like a lot of the practitioners will have like online group detoxes. They won't even be the people that they see, personally in the office, because it's a very gentle yet powerful detox. So there's a lot of different ways to go, but when you want to really get in deep, you want to get a practitioner that works with this on your side with you.
And they have to know and understand your products, because what I did,
Yeah, it
I
has
went
to
to my
be someone that
doctor,
knows their stuff.
I showed her the results, and she was like, "Great, go get zeolites."
Oh
And
yeah.
and
Okay.
so, well, like, okay, but what about all this other stuff? Well, I don't know. I'm not familiar with it. So what do you say to someone who's, and I'm sure that's what probably happens now. You go to your doctor, I have
Yeah,
no
if
idea.
they say go get zeolites, well, I'm sure they're handling other parts of your health well, but this is obviously not their game. And that's sort of a buzzword. Oh, zeolite. It does some stuff, but it's not specific for this. It won't really do much for this at all. Uh, so then you want, on our site, in fact, if you call us, we can refer to different people that we have. Now, telemedicine is so big, it's pretty easy. In fact, there are clinicians, that are mostly training doctors. So you talk to either Dr. Dale White or Dr. Matt Reddy, and they'll do telemedicine too on the side. They just do that as part of their practice. There's certain, they have to lead you through the test, but then if you want like recommendations and stuff, you can employ them on the side, or we can find somebody in your area if you want to see them direct, or a telemedicine.
So then, yeah, you need, how many practitioners do you think are familiar with like your protocol, what you would recommend, you trust?
So we weren't totally sure who knew what. And so we built an online learning management system called Quicksilver Scientific Institute for the practitioners to go through learning all of our stuff. Here's how you look at testing. Here's how you interpret it. Here's all the detox systems. Here's how you use them. So an easy thing is to use one of our QSI grads, because we know that they went through our training.
Ah, okay. So we can get that on your website. I will make
Yeah.
sure I find a link to that and put that in the show notes,
Yeah,
because
and yeah,
that's key.
and if we are in a transition of building a new website that's going to have more functionality. So if there's any questions, you just call our customer experience and
Oh,
they'll
good.
help.
Okay, that's really, really important to know, because like the first heavy metal test I took, it was like I just got this result of a piece of paper, and you're like, well, now what? What do you
Yeah,
do? And that's the
exactly. Now
dangers.
what?
So then
Yeah.
let's say somebody like me who has this, then you how say the general protocol that you recommend, how long does that person has to go through that, or how long do I have to go through that? And how much does that cost? And then what I do, a retest again after to see if it's all cleaned out?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really variable. Some of the companies, have this like everybody does this, and this. It's 12 months long and it's going to cost you this month. And I just don't play that way, because everybody is different. And some people want the Cadillac, all the stuff in. Other people are minimalists. Some people have no money. Some people have a lot of money. And so there's going to be a period to just abstract it. There's a period of formal detox where you're all in, you're taking as many of the things as you're willing to take into your protocol. And, like Cube 2.0, which is like everything, that's 9 weeks. Now, does that mean you're totally done that? No. Now you might retest that. Best would be give it about 2 weeks to equilibrate everything, retest, and then pick how much you're going to continue with, because you have the formal detox, then you got a long where I'm going to choose like 3 of those things and keep taking those for another 3 to 6 months. Depends how high the metals are and which metals they are. Like lead is a long-term thing. And lead, you got a body burden that's integrated into your bones. And I could take, like, if I could go in and pick all the lead out of your blood and magically, and then look at it in a month later, you'd have a ton more back in there as it redistributes. So lead is detox, wait, detox, wait, detox, wait over years.
Mhm.
Uh, Mercury, similar thing. If I magically pulled all the mercury out of your blood, much more is in your tissue that's in your blood. So it takes a lot of time to turn over and equilibrate the tissue load with the blood load. So you're really a minimum of 3 months of focus on this,
Mhm.
and up to a year, and then with lead it's even more, but it's not constant.
Well, with the mercury, one of the recommendation is just right now stop eating fish and seafood. Like, don't keep
Oh,
putting
yeah,
fuel in the fire,
yeah,
right?
you're gonna do that. And if you stop and you do our whole detox, even in 9 weeks, you're gonna be way, 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 way lower. But then you want to keep some things going, like the IMD, glutathione. You'll decide what really fits into the life. The bitters are going to be something that I think it's sort of a staple here at Quicksilver. Like everybody has bitters, but especially women, and especially menopausal women, it's just part of the game.
How do you take it? I mean, it's kind of bitter,
Uh,
right?
well, have you ever had ours?
No, I just got
You
some
know,
at the pharmacy and I gotta get a
uh,
hold of yours. It tastes
it,
good. Are you saying it's not bitter?
yeah, no, I mean it is bitter, but it's not like wang.
Yeah.
It's you'll find it's a very palatable bitter, and you all of our products, you take them and they're in these pump bottles, and you just dispense them in your mouth, and you're holding them intraorally, and these tiny liposomes and nano emulsion particles, because that's the key to how our stuff works, is this delivery. And we're making these tiny little fat bubbles suspended in water, and they're holding onto the nutrient. And as soon as you put it in your mouth, they start going into the capillaries under the lining of the mouth. In 2 minutes, you can measure this stuff in your blood. It'll peak 15 to 20 minutes. You swallow it, it's absorbing in the stomach, in the upper GI. It's all in 15 to 25 minutes. And so we have all these different compounds, some of them plant compounds, some of them vitamins, some of them these things like glutathione that are, kind of like amino acids, and they all go in at once, and they trigger all this stuff to happen at once. And that's part of this, take it in intraorally, and it all happens. So the bitters, you take that, it could be before a meal to get digestion going. It could be after a meal because you feel a little heavy and you want some more pull through there. And it could be, we don't realize all these things that go along with bile stagnation, like itching skin. That's often bile salts under your skin because you're not dumping from your gallbladder. Take a little bitters, and that all opens up. There's so many ways you start using this and integrating it into your life. And it's, bitters is this constant detox, constant moving all of that through. And we don't realize there's bitter receptors all through our body. There's bitter receptors on the pancreas, and they're responding to bitter flavors and helping you do blood sugar regulation. My ex-wife used to talk about, we're so addicted to sweet, but we need more bitter. Everything is, pacifying our need for sweet, but we need these bitter flavors that were part of all the plants. We were eating greens, we were eating dandelion greens, all these broccoli rabe, all these different things that have these bitter flavors. They're the things that are enhancing that. And in women, there's bitter receptors on the ovaries.
Whoa. Okay. It's amazing because so many of these things you can relate to, oh, it's menopause. Well, maybe it's heavy metal toxicity, or maybe it's a little bit of both. And it's
Maybe it's a little bit of both,
the
because
symptoms,
they're
yeah.
feeding and that was sort of what I was trying to, sort of show the symphony of in the beginning is, when it goes, they're both feeding into the same thing. And, they're feeding problems, and they kind of piggyback on one another. They both feed the same problems, and fixing them both need the same thing.
Yeah, incredible. So it sounds to me is whether you have lead metal is quite a longer detox, mercury, it could be several months, it could be a year. Everybody's different, bio individual, depends also probably how fast you go, like if you're going to take the slow route or the fast
Yeah.
route, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, when we did Tony Robbins' detox, we got him down fast, but he was at super dangerous levels. And he has a bunch of assistants, like executive assistants around him all day long. And we set up this thing. He would have to dose like 6 times a day. And they had this whole plexiglass tray they made to get all the things done right. And came right down. So it's like how much are you gonna invest into it?
Yeah, exactly. And then it sounds like there's a maintenance
Yeah.
thing to do because eventually I want to go back to eating seafood and having perhaps just sardines, I guess. But
Well, yeah, you're gonna have choices. So you're gonna stay, you're not gonna be going for ahi tuna all the time. You're not gonna be going to get a swordfish steak with basil pesto on it. When you get sushi, you're gonna spread it around and not as much always, oh, I'll have 4 tons of otoro this time. You're just gonna choose a little bit differently. Sardines and anchovies, you could eat those every bite that ever goes into your mouth, and you'll never be mercury toxic.
oh,
And
you
so
mean I
the
can eat them
smaller the
now,
fish. Oh
even
yeah,
as I'm starting to
even
detox?
detoxing, you could do those, and you'd get all the omega 3s and stuff.
Oh,
Yeah, like I had a guy who eats them every day, and but never any bigger fish. His methyl mercury was like 1.2 or something. So it's a choicing and spreading it around and keeping detox stuff working. And so, like I said, there's a formal detox, but I keep this stuff around. Like our most central detox thing is push catch liver detox. It's this stuff called liver sauce, which has bitters in it, has NRF2 upregulators, and binder, ultra binder. And you take liver sauce, and 30 minutes later, you take the binder, and you just did a nice little tight cycle of detox. And maybe you throw some glutathione in there. You should do that a couple of times a week. Keep it as a supplement that you're not just blindly doing every day. You're doing it a couple times a week. And if you have a sauna, push, sauna, catch. I do that all the time. That is a huge part of what I do. You're doing yoga, push, yoga, catch. All that movement, stretching and rotating is moving the lymph and starting to put stuff around there. It just gives you this 30-minute window to do some mindful thing for your health. So you integrate that
yeah,
into
yeah.
your lifestyle.
I am glad you mentioned that, yeah, because when we think of detox, we also think of, yes, sweating it out. You're exercising, you're going to the sauna, your red
Yep.
lights, I guess, infrared sauna as
Oh
well
yeah.
helps. And all these things are really important. So I'm glad you did mention that because it's not just, oh, let's take a product and then, hope it works because you got to pee
Yeah,
poo and
and
sweat
it's
it
not
out,
just,
right?
oh, I have to do this detox once in my life and then I'm done. It was long overdue by the time you do it, and then it needs to be integrated in your life. And number one thing for listeners out there, a detox does not mean that you park yourself next to the bathroom and you're fed a lot of laxatives and you're just going to poop all day long.
Yeah.
That's not what this means. You're doing it right through your normal life. Because a lot of people, they get that kit and they stick it up in the corner and they're like, yeah, one day I'm gonna like park myself at home and do this. And that's not the case.
Yeah, no, exactly. Don't wait. Just get started. And the sooner you do it, the sooner you'll probably feel better because, like you mentioned, usually people who are feeling have the heavy metal toxicity, they feel tired, they have the brain fog, and these sort of menopausal symptoms. And it could very well be a little bit of, yeah, heavy metal exposure. So we have to wrap up now because I still have so many questions. So I think we're going to have to do the hormone one if you're open to it on another one just to discuss all the hormones because I'm so excited about your products and I'm doing my own experiments too, which I'd love to share. But before we
Yeah.
do, is it okay that we have another?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But I do want to still finish up with the Quicksilver products because some of our listeners are not in North America. Uh, are they able to get your products?
Yeah, now it varies, which ones exactly are available in, which country. Like if you say chock-a-block, then you're obviously from Canada. Uh, and then certain ones I can get IMD, you can get glutathione, C-lipoic, liver sauce. Some of the others aren't there yet. In Europe, we have a lot that are available through Life Extension EU. They sell a number of products. Amrita sells, Skinny Raw sells. There's Japan, New Zealand. I think it's FX Med. I can't remember, but you can get things in New Zealand. And even in Australia, you can order from New Zealand to ship into Australia. So it varies.
Okay, so if
We're
somebody just
in
Googles
South
their
America.
If they go to quicksilverscientific.com, they can see which one they want, and then they can
And
Google
yeah, on
that and see what.
quicksilverscientific.com, yeah, I think you scroll down to the bottom. I don't remember exactly where it is, but there's a list of all of our international distributors.
Perfect. Oh, that's
Yeah,
really good
links
to
to
know.
them and stuff. And so that's go to the Quicksilver site. And then, there'll be e-tailers all over the place and see who will ship to you.
So great to hear that, because so many times I get these emails like, I great podcast, can't get the product. Sorry.
Yeah.
And this is really good news. So
Where are
uh,
most of your followers from?
most of them are from North America, but we do have about 30% who are in other places in Europe and Asia. And yeah, it would be nice to be able to
Yeah, yeah,
see
there's more and more.
those
Oh,
things.
and we have Hong Kong. There's distribution opening up into China. There's a guy in Singapore. So there's a fair amount of ways to get it.
Cool. So I think we have a plan now for me and for anyone else who's listening who's concerned about their heavy metal toxicity. Uh, I'd like to ask about, though, are there any specific heavy metal sources or exposure pathways that women should really be cautious about as they're aging and going through their perimenopause, transition? Like, how can they minimize those potential
Yeah,
risks?
so fish is a really big one. And even though I said, yeah, at the top of the food chain you got a lot of mercury, at the bottom of the food chain you got a lot of arsenic. And so the Japanese and Chinese samples that come in here, they're usually high in mercury and arsenic, and sometimes some others depending on what their industrial exposures are. If you're in Asia or South America, there's a high premium on being white versus brown, and they use a lot of creams that are skin whitening creams. Many of those are mercury based creams.
Oh,
And
no.
mercury is really good at poisoning the melanocytes, so they stop making pigment. And that's how they work. And so be really careful of those. Uh, there are some makeups, but I don't really have a list of things that are really bad there. Just trying to think if there's any. Those are the major pathways that you're going to be exposed to.
And probably if you have mercury fillings that you're gonna remove, to do it properly, with a
Oh,
qualified
that's
dentist.
yeah. Somebody who's been trained in this. There's something called the SMART protocol, just right like that. And those guys are trained by a group called IAOMT, and they'll on their site have a list of all the doctors who use SMART protocol are certified in that, because you can make things worse by just when you drill them out, you vaporize a whole bunch. So these guys have a way of doing it where you don't get exposed. So it's really important to get them properly removed.
So important. So I appreciate that. So let's cool it on the fish. Be careful. I have my Hong Kong. I used to live in Hong Kong. My Hong Kong friends are going to warn them all about the whitening creams.
Oh
And
yeah, and they have high arsenic levels in Hong Kong. My friend Lauren Bramley, who introduced me to the term chocolate block.
I know her. We did a podcast with her too.
Oh, she's one of my best friends, and I've known her forever. And her practice took a big shift in Hong Kong when she met me, and she would have all these detox systems going over there because everybody was so high in these metals and all these things that were really difficult to treat. These women weren't shifting. All of a sudden, you take the metals out, and everything goes smooth. And then she opened a place in Whistler. You think it's all pretty and clean up there. They have massive lead levels in their drinking water.
Wow. Well, but I thought the arsenic would be coming from the rice.
Arsenic sometimes comes from rice, but they were using apparently an arsenical to kill all the roaches over there.
Oh my goodness. Interesting. Oh wow. We'll have to, yeah, so much work to do. Dr. Shade, I'm gonna have to let you go, but I want to have everybody please go to the show notes. We're gonna have so much information there. How to find quicksilverscientific.com. We'll have your Facebook, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, the website, and how to get some of these kits. I cannot recommend highly enough to please take your head out of the sand and do a heavy metal detox test. Okay. It's got to be done, and better to do it sooner than later. So please go and get that. You can use the code Zora15 for 15% off all the Quicksilver favorites. I'll have links to that too. We are going to have another podcast talking all about the hormones that they're offering, the estradiol, estradiol, progesterone. You have so many great stuff that I'd love to talk about. And I'm going to have my own little sharing of my own experience. And
That's
are there any, first of all, are there any new products or events coming into the pipeline that we should know about, or something you want to share?
something we just released or just uh, made noise about is called Cardio Elite. Right now in cardiovascular world, there's nitric oxide upregulators and these different nitrites and nitrates are king amongst those. There's what's called the endothelial glycocalyx, which is a little lining inside the blood vessels, which protects them. And there's products for that. And then there's different herbal products for opening. They're kind of like long-term vascular tonics, and they help open up the blood vessels and get flow all through the body. And so originally these were like three different products. We put them all together in one. There's an immediate drop of blood pressure when it's high. If blood pressure is normal, nothing happens. Then there's a long-term shifting, both cardiometabolically, the whole lipid profile shifts, and you're healing the lining and the inflammation in the lining of the blood vessels. And so even if you don't have cardiovascular issues, this will help with exercise, recovery, cognition. Man, it gets so much blood up to the brain, and sexual function. For guys, they're like, oh, the morning, I remember that. The wake up call. And so all this stuff, works so much better. And if you have, like, I come from a cardiovascular problem family, and it's just been a miracle for me. So that's probably my favorite product that's out now since the hormones.
Oh, it just came out, so we can
Yeah.
get it now.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
we got to do a
Cardio
whole
Elite.
other, what?
Yeah. It's called Cardio Elite.
Cardio Elite. Okay, I'll have to make sure I get that in the show notes too. But I think we need to do a whole other podcast also on cardiovascular health.
Oh, absolutely.
You have so much information. You are so knowledgeable. I'm so grateful that I met you, that you're here. And are there any last words for a woman going through the menopause transition?
The most the hardest thing that we fight against is in our own mind, and the fear and getting locked into that spin. And then your estrogen's going to be going up and down and up and down. When it's up, you're manic, and it can be irritable and anxious, and when it's down, you're blank. And breath work, gratitude, and just keeping it even keel is the most important thing that we can do towards our healing. And some of the things, progesterone definitely keeps that calm while it's going up and down. GABA does, CBD does. You can lean on those, but bringing into your daily practice a gratitude, breathing, slowing down, letting yourself get back to equilibrium, and believing in yourself, and that'll
Oh,
go so long.
oh, I love it. Oh, you do know a woman. Thank you so much, Dr. Shade, for your time. I'm really looking forward to our next conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful day.